Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another security masterclass today on EDR, Integrated Inside of Insight. For anybody joining us that are on the N-Central platform, still stick around. There'll still be some commonality between the Insight and N-Central platforms. You'll still get some value out of today's session. Just to set the agenda, everybody is on mute, so don't hesitate to use the questions panel to ask questions throughout the session. I'll keep an eye on that and try to answer questions as they come in. But if anything deserves a one-on-one conversation, we might line that up for later. This is going to be about a 45-minute, 50-minute session, unless there are a lot of questions, so we should be able to get everybody out by lunchtime that's on East Coast time. And to start out, we're going to start out with just some familiarity. Since we do have different attendees that have different levels of experience with Insight and EDR, we're going to start out with just, well, let's make sure everybody has a basic understanding of what MDR is first. Enable MDR, we call it Enable MDR, but I like breaking it down more into its components because, well, market spin in the channel is what it is, and what one person calls MDR is not the same thing that another person calls MDR. So what Enable MDR offering is yes, it is managed detection and response, but it is a whole platform that delivers a complete pipeline. It's going to be a SIM. It will function as a replacement for any other SIMs you may be using. And that's the first foremost priority of the product, is to be a SIM. That is the base function of it. Without that base function, all of the others can't follow. Then there's the XDR, so the expanded detection and response across a larger range of sources of data. SOAR, security orchestration and automated response, so that the platform can perform automated tasks and actions for you in response to an event, and then passing that into a 24/7 SOC for the things that can't be automated. So there are human eyes on screens and fingers on keyboards to triage, investigate, and remediate events. Um, and that remediation will be covering, we won't cover that too much today of what kind of remediation can you perform. But I wanted to go through the MDR offering really, really quickly, just so I can highlight on one thing before we get into the EDR conversation. And whenever we get into this EDR conversation, if anybody is like, yes, I like this, I want to start using this inside of Insight, and I haven't before, we have an opportunity right now to start out with free licenses. It'll be 5 control, 5 complete, and 5 of the network discovery licenses available for you. Um, the flow for this, we will be going through this flow so that you won't have to, be blind to it. But the reason I'm mentioning MDR prior to EDR is because I really wanted to hammer in on this distinction, which I believe if you know this distinction going into what we're going to be talking about with EDR today, um, it'll help you get a bigger picture on things. So first is, let's talk about, for our partners and any attendees that are here, because you are still using a standard endpoint security solution. You're still using traditional AV or something that may even be a more modern AV or endpoint security solution, but doesn't have modern EDR capabilities built into it. This is a great comparison of what the workflow with the actual day to day is going to look like using one of those solutions versus using EDR. And again, we have a mixed audience today, so if you're on the technical side, this is probably going to be obvious to you, but if you're on the businesses and sales side, this might genuinely be a new perspective and new information for you. I highly encourage you to take this and use it to better understand what it is and why we're using EDR solutions. If we start out here with the top, It goes from left to right, from a threat event being detected by the antivirus that's on an endpoint, all the way to the other side of applying lessons learned from the event. Whenever something happens, a anti-malware and antivirus on an endpoint detects a threat event, it's going to have to go through a lot of steps before eventually it gets into investigations. And if your engineer or a technician or a help desk is assigned um, to work an incident, they're going to have to investigate it. If all you have is a regular AV or endpoint security tool, gathering the forensics data and the information they need about that event isn't going to come from the console that they're using, because most of the time those consoles for those types of solutions will only report to you a time, the drive that the threat file was located on, the descriptive name the AV vendor decide to assign to whatever this piece of malware or virus is, and that it killed and quarantined it at this date and this time. And that's about the extent of the information it provides to you. And if you want more information, you have to do more. You're going to have to grab other tools. You're going to have to leave that management console for the AV and go start performing digital forensic investigations. Versus whenever you have an EDR solution, when you're in that investigation stage, well, the telemetry and the analytical data about an event is already available in the console. So with Enable EDR, you don't have to go other places to find out what happened. The information about what happened is right there in front of you. And that is a difference in, that's not a difference in minutes. This can be a difference in hours between the time and effort would take somebody on this top path to find the needed information versus someone on the bottom path with an EDR solution. It's already done for them. And that continues on for, well, we investigated, we figured out what happened, and we now need to fix it. That's going to be using other tools, writing custom scripts, manual remediations options with a normal solution versus an EDR solution. That's something that's already applied by the agents in near real time without any human involvement at all. So again, this is another difference of hours sometimes. Then if there are files that are modified during an event on our legacy AV, you would have to, pull those files that may have been modified during a threat event from backups. Whereas with an EDR solution that has the capability built into it, those files can be restored automatically from local VSS snapshots that are protected. Again, this is difference. This is a significant difference in the amount of labor inputs that are required to deal with a situation. But there's also a qualitative difference in these two things, these two paths. With a traditional AV, at the end of that path, you're kind of stuck in a situation of saying, well, we don't really know everything that happened. We don't have a ongoing log. We don't have a SIM. We don't have a whatever else it is that we needed to make any guarantees about this threat event. We know it happened. We know the AV caught it, but we can't tell you anything about what happened before, what happened after, and if we got everything. So no guarantees. Versus if we have an EDR solution in place, it's a much different statement at the end of it. We have high quality telemetry and analytical data available, and we're reasonably sure we know everything that happened, and we have a record of what was modified and the changes that were made, and then we have a record that those were undone and set back to their prior values for us. And those two different statements that you get to make there, that's a vast difference. But this also kind of reflects some other things like stress levels within your teams. If you are on the management or sales side and you have never been on the technical or engineering side, this is the difference between heartburn and nightmares for that team. These having the ability to make such drastically different statements at the end of investigating an event. And of course, this all takes care of just one component. That's just taking care of the endpoint. There is a broader conversation that we're not going to get into today about all of the other solutions that you're going to need in play to handle the rest of the estate. That's going to be probably enable MDR if you're looking for an offering for us. But we're going to switch over into the Insight EDR integration. And before we get into that, I have a few questions that have popped in. It looks like most of them have been addressed so far, but we do have one. If you are interested in the um, if you are interested in the MDR offering, the new it's right here actually being advertised on top here, the new acquisition we made a few days ago. We've already been offering Enable MDR for quite a few months. If you're interested in it, reach out to your partner success manager or let them know to be able to get you a trial started up. For EDR today, if you're inside of Insight, if you are not the person that normally manages or has full control over your Insight dashboard, follow along, but don't make any changes yet. You'll need to, have a conversation internally to decide on, which options should be turned on and off. But the integration now lives over here in the left nav bar underneath integration management. And within here, you will have the EDR endpoint detection and response with a start trial button. If you don't have the start trial button available, if you can't get to integration management, it might be a case of incorrect permissions on your user account. Check those and make sure. Or if you have it where it doesn't even give you the option of trial, or it says your trial's out of date or completed, reach out to your PSM, let them know. But to get started for the first time, it is simply going to be a start trial button up here. You'll click on start trial. It will create your tenancy for you, deal with the licensing for you, and then you'll get this view here. When you have this view, this is how you can map over your existing client hierarchy from Insight over to EDR. And I'm going to choose just one individual site at the moment, and you'll see that it automatically pulled not the site, but it pulled not the client, but it pulled the site name underneath the client. Same here. If I do this lab client that only has one site, it pulls the site underneath it. This flattening of your hierarchy is going to be something to be mindful of and understand, because we'll look at this client. This is going to be very common in a lot of Insight dashboards to have more than one site per client, as I do for this client right here. And whenever I check this, I'm actually checking both of the sites underneath them. So you'll see I get both of the sites. And if I go up and add another one, it's another site, another site, another site. Keep this flattening of your hierarchy in mind whenever you're doing this. It is not a multi-level hierarchy that you're familiar to inside of Insight. Each one of your customer sites are going to represent a unique individual site over inside of the EDR integration. So again, just be mindful of this mapping. Once you choose the sites you're going to create, it'll going to ask you which users you want to create, and then it'll verify, okay, is this correct? Are you happy with this? Hit confirm. It will go create that integration and tenancy for you. Once that is created, and I'm just going to hit confirm here, just so we can kind of show through the process. We will then get, there we go. We should now have our initial integration set up between EDR and the Insight dashboard. And we should now get a experience that is going to be familiar to the other functionality in the dashboard. So you'll start to be able to find, once it populates in the list over here, and mine's taking a minute to populate since I just turned mine on, you will get the EDR option underneath settings, so you can start enabling EDR in a way that is familiar to you for all of your other features inside of Insight of enabling it by a individual device. So if I double click an individual device, I should be able to get to EDR and enable the EDR for the individual device. So you'll see that it's warning me that I have to log in to Sentinel-1, the EDR, to apply and edit policies. All you're doing inside of the Insight dashboard is going to be turning it on and off, or telling it to use the parent settings inherency like you're used to with everything else for risk intelligence, for take control, for patch management. That same familiar hierarchy of turning it on at an individual computer, at a site, or at a client. But we still have to go to the S1 dashboard to apply our configurations. So I'm going to grab my S1 dashboard I have access to really quickly. And we're going to go over a few of those. Well, what should I be setting for my configurations over there? This will be a kind of a quick little review if you've been through any of the other EDR demonstrations. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just well, where should I be getting started at for just a few minutes before we start moving on to more advanced capabilities inside of EDR. All right. Give me just a second to get through the multiple MFAs. Here we go. Here's my S1 dashboard, the EDR. And again, your hierarchy structure is going to be mapped over however you decide to map it over. So you'll need to keep that in mind whenever you're in here working in the scope. So we're just going to choose a environment in here really quickly. We'll choose head nerds. And we're going to go look at our policy configurations, which is underneath Sentinels. If you do not, if this is not a familiar dashboard view for you, don't worry. I'll show you a different view that you might be more familiar with. But for the moment, this is what the majority of users are going to see. And we'll see now that I'm underneath Sentinels for this particular client from my Insight dashboard. I can now come to policy and change what I want my policies to be. There is a default global policy, which is an okay policy. There's nothing explicitly incorrect about it, but there are features disabled that you might want to take advantage of. Detect versus protect. This is just telling the product, do I want an EDR agent to automatically take action against things, or do I just want it to detect what is happening? This is useful for onboarding. This is useful for testing and creating exclusions. But once you have switched it over to protect because you're in normal operations, this protection level, this is the first real question you have to answer for yourself that nobody can give you a default correct answer for. These are simply, do I want these to be the automated responses of an agent on an endpoint? This is not an on-off switch for these features. It's simply, do I want an agent when a threat is detected to automatically do these things? Kill and quarantine, that's traditional AV behavior that everybody should be familiar with. But then the remediate and the rollback actions. Remediate will revert any system configuration changes, registry modifications back to their prior state to the event. And rollback will take any files that were modified back to their previous version using the VSS snapshots that are kept protected on the system. And again, which one of these you choose is going to be a individual by client and risk evaluation of if you have a very sensitive server that you're afraid to even sneeze around because the line of business application that is on it was from a business that went out of business that quit operation 7 years ago, and there's no way to get support or updated definitions or anything. So probably leave those servers on kill and quarantine, and the remediation and rollback actions would be things you would use after you investigate an incident. The the choice on the rollback and the remediate, again, you have to sit there and say, am I fine with these actions being taken after you've looked at it, not it being an automated action. But for your standard workstations where everybody is using web portals to access and do their work, you could probably leave it on remediate or even rollback as automatic actions where nobody on your team needs to investigate and decide if you need to take those next actions. In certain cases, if the risk profile of an environment dictates that you can't do the automatic remediate or rollback, you have to just do the kill quarantine, and then you have to investigate and decide whether the remediate or rollback actions are needed, and you're not a 24/7 operation. There is an opportunity to enroll in the vigilance offering, which would offload that initial triage and investigation to the vigilance service, to a SOC team that is dedicated purely just to that purpose. So instead of you burning the payroll to keep somebody on staff 24/7, you can offload that responsibility with a slightly higher license cost. Some other options in here that are worth knowing about and understanding is going to be the detect interactive threat option over here. This is off by default, but this is one of the more significant pieces of security and hardening that the EDR can offer for endpoints because it is dealing with um, living off the land tactics. So using PowerShell or command line or other bash or scripting to take actions against an endpoint. These are what are commonly used by modern threat actors, and this is an engine that is dedicated specifically for monitoring for malicious activity happening in that way. It is not a panacea for all possible situations where you have a live threat actor compromising a system, but it increases your chances of catching what they're doing and stopping them and blocking. But it does mean that if you are in a heavily automated environment where a lot of PowerShell scripts or um, command line or Python or anything like that is being used, you might have to turn this off or create adequate exclusions. The malicious macros mitigation, if your dashboards have this option available, uh, just be mindful that if you enable this feature, it will cause complications for your clients if they do rely on macros a lot, especially if they're in finance or something similar where there are a ton of macros being used across Excel and, um, excuse me, a bunch of macros being used in the Office suite. And then the disconnect from network option. This has been here for a while, but I always re-mention it. Treat this gently and carefully, because if you do turn this on, you're now telling the agent that if it detects a threat on an endpoint, isolate that device on the network. That will stop productivity for that endpoint, for that user. Your clients need to know and understand that that is a capability and that is a service that you are selling them. And that since you are selling it to them, now your intention should, of course, be to make a margin on it or to um, otherwise reduce your risk exposure. But it is going to irritate a client if you don't tell them that this is what's going to happen, to get buy-in from the client that this is what's going to happen. So don't turn this on until you have had a conversation with your clients about this capability, what it's going to do, what it's going to mean for you and for them. The rest of the options down here, we're not going to get too much into. There's good descriptions of those in our other daily demos, but specifically calling attention to the deep visibility. This is the difference between control and complete licenses. With control licenses, it is a reduced functionality of the agent in that it will only record events that the agent says is a threat. If something happens on the endpoint, the EDR agent classifies it as a threat. It will gladly record that information and make it available for you in the dashboard. But all of the other information about everything else that's happening on the endpoint is lost with a control license. With a complete license, a lot of that information is recorded. So all of these different types of events are going to be recorded and made available to you inside of the deep visibility section with the complete license. So why would we want that difference? What's the meaningful impact of having the control versus the complete? For that deep visibility, you're really going to want to use that whenever the risk of the environment dictates it, whether you're going to use control or complete. Small business, small retail operation, they only make a couple of $100,000 a year, or maybe a few million a year. They may not justifiably need complete license. But if you have a client that is in a regulated industry, or if a threat event occurs, you need extensive log information and extensive event information and analytical data available, because this client will be filing an insurance claim, and the insurance claim is going to be for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. They're probably going to want the complete license, because that's going to facilitate that digital forensic investigation that's going to have to be done by the insurer, by the incident response team that they're going to bring in. And it is the difference between days of interaction versus a couple of hours of interaction. If you can simply provide them access to the wealth of data that would be available in something such as deep visibility, so they can see things like all of the registry activity that's happened in an environment from a specific time point or to specific systems, they would have access to it. That's back to those two comparison charts we had earlier on what is the difference between one event, what is the difference between your workflows with AV versus an EDR that is recording this type of quality information for you. And this information in here by default is going to be 14 days of retention. If you want longer retention than that, I would suggest let your PSM know. We do have longer retentions available. But if you are looking at this as a SIM solution, I would, not that this can't handle it for endpoints, but you're missing everything else. If you need a true SIM, I would not go with EDR and let it be my SIM for my endpoints. There are better ways of approaching that, and I would probably be more inclined to recommend enable MDR. Longer retention periods are available by default, more, and it's going to be more licensing wise. It's going to be a little bit more permissive for you on the MDR side to get more data from more sources rather than just from your workstations and servers, but also from your security appliances, your network your network appliances, your cloud services, your identity management plane solution, all of those types of things. I would suggest if you need SIM functionality, MDR over the EDR for that. The events that we're looking at in here, though, as we're looking at these, I'm going to give a non security example and some security examples of what you would take advantage of and what you could use the information that's going to be populated by the complete license. So, anybody that's been on help desk for long enough, you've seen it, you've probably are guilty of it yourself. Help desk ticket comes in, there's an issue with a workstation, you spend 15 or 20 minutes investigating it, and you find out, there's a couple of suggested remediations for it, and you find a reg edit that's going to take care of it. So you find a .reg file that says this will fix the issue, it'll change these configurations on the endpoint, and you'll be fine. And then you apply it, and those registry modifications don't do anything, or sometimes, in fact, they make the situation even worse. And now you're left with, well, didn't make a backup of the registry before I applied because it said it was going to fix it. And now you're in an even worse situation, and you have to start thinking about, well, what other tools can I use? Am I going to have to, at some point, grab a registry from another good working system and copy it over? Do I need to individual values? Do I need to just reload the system? Um, that is something that can take a 20-minute situation into a 6-hour situation. One of the nice things about the complete license is it does have a record of those registry modifications that were made to systems. So let's say I did this. I screwed up, made some modification to the registry, didn't do a backup beforehand, and now my only choice is to reload the system. Uh, I can come into S1. I can find those registry modification events by time bounding it based on when it happened or the individual machine that I'm looking for. But I can find the event and then say, yeah, that is the registry modification that happened. Oh, look, there's the new value for me. I could just go change that value manually. Serves my purpose. But let's say I don't want to take that long. Um, let's go ahead and say that there are multiple registry changes that were made. I'm going to select that device or select this one event. And what I'm going to tell it is, well, I'm telling everything that's involved this storyline. So EDR keeps a track of everything that is related to each other, which child process comes from which parent process, which child process spawns another process, and how they're all connected. That is maintained by the EDR agent, so it knows what is involved in a chain of events. So that's the storyline which represents that chain of events. And I can tell it that I want to treat anything that's involved with that as a threat. It will then treat this chain of events like it will any other threat event it detected. It will kill it, quarantine any processes that are associated with it, and the remediation action will start reverting these values back to their previous times for you, to their previous value for you. This puts you, again, this is time savings. This is a non-security application of the product, but this kind of peels back a little bit of the capabilities and the type of information and the wealth and the breadth and depth of information that's being recorded. Um, there are, of course, some differences here between EDR capability on Windows, Mac, and PC. So, of course, there's no registry to keep track of on a Mac OS, but it will still be keeping track of a lot of system modifications and changes that can still be dealt with by the remediation action. The rollback action is not available for Macs or Linux. So that is a important distinction there. And that's because the EDR agent here, it is not creating a new function on the Windows systems to do this. It is simply taking advantage of the VSS snapshots, the shadow copies on a system, but it's protecting those snapshots by, and we're going to grab for some demonstration here, I'm going to go grab my workstation I've got set up here. So we've got a workstation set up here with EDR installed. I'm going to open up command prompt really quick on this machine, and we are going to issue a command against the VSS really quickly so we can kind of demonstrate what that's going to look like, because it is a important feature of the product. One of the things that a threat actor is going to do once they gain access to a system and they are preparing to deliver ransomware, or they're preparing to maliciously delete information. Let me go ahead and get that. There we go. So there we go. Where is that screen? VSS admin. We're going to run this command real quick. VSS admin delete shadows. And you'll see that it will say, oh, it just blocked me there. But whenever you go through this, we'll go for C here, as it's, there we go. So yes, but those copies are still there. So it said there were two. I deleted them. It told me that it deleted those two copies successfully, but yet those two copies are still present. So that's another one of the protective measures that the EDR agent is putting in place on the systems to protect some, to prevent a threat actor from modifying that behavior and defeating it. It's not a guarantee. There's always the possibility of, a threat actor being, more clever than the average one, and they could still potentially put you in a situation where you have to restore from backups. So do not ever think of the rollback capability as a replacement for good backups. Now we're going to go into some security, a little bit more into some expectations on security, what the experience is like for the end user experience here, and also so we can populate some information into the dashboard. So if we go back to incidents, so as the agents are out there and running, you'll see right there it pinged me for an interactive session command.exe. Go into this event, my agents are set to detect, not protect, so they didn't take any action, so it just saw it, but it captured it, reported it back into me, lets me know when it was, which user it was on the system, the type of detection, is it affecting multiple systems or only one? That way you can quickly get a gauge on, is this a widespread issue or very isolated? And then it gives me my threat indicators over here on the right hand side of, well, what about this was bad behavior that we can map to the MITRE attack framework. So if you've ever seen an incident report, they will commonly have a bunch of canned responses in there about tactics, techniques, and processes that were being used by a threat actor or by a threat during an event. That's what this is. This is linking you to those things so I can say, if I want to investigate a particular capability, I can click on it. That will take me over to the MITRE ATT&CK, and it will give me information about whatever that particular tactic technique is, some examples of its use and who is using it. So you can um, maybe start getting into attribution, and then also mitigations that can be put in place and detections that can be used to find that type of tactic, technique, or process. You do not have to dive this deep in. This is absolutely a fuzzy line between offering managed EDR services and offering digital forensics investigations and response capabilities. You're probably not going to need to dive that deep into the threat indicators, but don't think of it as a, well, I don't need to take advantage of them. You can grow into them. Even if you might not need them today, you can definitely grow into them and start taking advantage of them. But it is for the technical side, for the engineers, for the incident responders, definitely learn about these because they will make you better at your job. But for sales and management side of these MITRE ATT&CK tactics and everything, they're valuable for you to at least learn about and understand so that you can potentially um, use it to somehow drive additional margins. Maybe you use this information to improve your reports that you're providing to clients. But that was that one event that we saw. And again, if I had the EDR agent set up to the network quarantine feature, so we had that network isolation feature enabled. As soon as this event was detected by the agent, then it would have locked the device down on the network. There would have been no more communication to anything else except to back to the S1 EDR console. And I would be able to come in here, instead of it being a disconnect option, it would be a reconnect option for that event. So I could tell this to just say, yeah, no, let that device reconnect. I've looked at it, I've investigated, it's safe, it should be allowed back on the network. But for this, I'm going to say, yeah, no, I want this killed quarantined. I'm going to choose a mitigation action. I'm going to tell it to carry out everything, mark it as resolved, add any additional notes that I needed to have in here. Yes, this is a true positive, apply. So it will now run through this process. And if I go grab that VM and open up, we'll see eventually this will kick over and clear for me as a mitigated threat. But while we're waiting on that, let's go to a more, an actual piece of, well, we'll go with a ransomware today. So we go, see it fixed it back to what it should be, mitigated. So we're now going to drop and detonate an actual piece of ransomware. Um, One of the questions I always come up against is, how do I demonstrate capabilities for a partner, for a prospect? How do I prove that EDR is doing something? Because there is always that challenge that, if you come in, sell somebody a security solution, you install it, and then you don't catch anything for a couple of months, they'll probably start asking about, well, what's the value of the service? And that's that very tight line that MSPs have to walk between being invisible and being unobtrusive, and avoiding the dreaded conversations of, well, we haven't seen you do anything for us for a couple of months, so we don't think we need you anymore. Being able to demonstrate live ransomware payloads or live malware is a great way during QBRs or during sales presentations to kind of prove the point. If you don't know where to get these types of live ransomware samples from, This is wholly a personal recommendation here. Malware Bazaar is a really good place to go, but at your own risk, at your own peril. These are fully active um, malware samples and ransomware samples and info stealer samples. So you should never go to here on any production system. You should never download any of these samples from a production system. It should always be through virtualization, through enclaving, through proper segmentation. Basically, a don't play in the don't go play in the nuclear waste if you don't know how to do it safely. But I've grabbed some samples from here already, and we're going to go with the Black Matter ransomware that's here. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to run that, and then we're going to see that S1 is automatically picking it up. And we also got the hit from the Microsoft's mark of the web, but we're going to tell it run anyway. And then we'll see how the S1 will start catching these events. And if we go look at our S1 dashboard, we'll start seeing those events coming in. And you can show them the actual damage, the actual things that are being done in real time to their systems, all of the actions that are actually being taken by the platform, so you can prove out that yes, this is working just fine. I'm going to let this one run for a minute, and then we're going to kill it. But this is how you can populate information into the dashboard, see an event, see how it's going to behave, demonstrate functionality, assist with sales, assist with the goodwill, the confidence in the solution that you are delivering. We'll go ahead and actions, mitigate actions, yes, roll back, mark as resolved, true positive, apply, and then we'll again see those actions being carried out. And this is again back to those two comparative charts we were looking at earlier about what does the workflows look like. Well, that was the workflow from the EDR point of view, from the S1 point of view. If I didn't have something like EDR in place, I had a more traditional endpoint security solution in place. None of this automatic remediation would have been this easy. I would have needed to do investigation on the endpoint, which would have taken me time. And then it's like, oh, am I a skilled individual? Maybe I could have done it in 30 minutes. The average individual. It might have taken me an hour. This is now taken care of in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. It's done. I can close out my tickets. Here's all of my information I need about the event, the threat indicators associated with it, the fact that it was successfully quarantined and mitigated and taken care of. And I can now close out the incident. So there are some very big differences there that may not convey value to the client, especially if they're just buying a service from you. They're not going to be concerned with if something took you an hour or 5 minutes. But you are definitely going to be concerned with if something took you 5 minutes or an hour, because that directly impacts your margins. We're going to now close out on something with two more things with one thing with the deep visibility, and then a look into the future. With the complete license, again, you have the availability of all of the information about what is happening on your endpoints available for you to be searched through. And we can, just as an example of one, there is an advanced query in here for suspicious PowerShell with base 64 in the command line. So yes, there is absolutely a syntax to learn to write these queries. Plenty of examples in there, and there's also examples available on the internet for pre-formed ones, but it's something you'll learn like it just any other type of query language. but it's looking for an event process where the uh, target image or the target process image contains PowerShell, or the display name contains PowerShell, and the command line contains anything that matches this regex expression. So if I run this, I'm probably, I'm doing this for the last 24 hours. I'm probably not going to catch anything. But now I have to put it on somebody on my team as a responsibility to come here and run this query and then, look for it and investigate it and figure out what they want to do with it. For me, if I don't use obfuscation. Code 64, base 64 encoding of a PowerShell uh, script is something that a lot of threat actors do to cover their trails, to make it harder for you to find what they're doing, to improve the chances that they're going to evade defenses. I personally never use base 64 encoding in my scripts. Nobody else on my team should be. I would probably say, you know what? I'm going to treat this as an absolute red flag. If this ever happens, I know it's not because of me. It's not anybody. It's not any of my technicians, engineers. This is somebody doing something in the environment they should not be doing. I always need to know about this immediately, and I need the agents to immediately treat it as a threat. You can create a custom star rule from this from this query. And custom star rules are pretty expansive in what you can use them to do. You can, here's the base 64 one. We're going to go edit it really quickly. And it allows you to choose, what kind of severity is this type of detection. The query itself that will find and match to a certain set of behavior or certain events on the system. And then, well, what do I want to treat this as? Do I simply want this to be an alert that's going to be sent to me? Or do I want the agent to say, no, this is a threat, it is malicious, and I want you to quarantine the device? Because this is obviously somebody doing something in the environment without our permission. And then this would be a rule that's now active on the system as a star rule. And from this point on, anytime that happens, the system will take that response in an automated fashion. That's a good esoteric just example on the security side. But you can also, more practical reasons, uh, indicators of churn. That's something business should be concerned with, is how can we find out as early as possible that we potentially have a client that might be a risk of losing that client. Well, there's going to be some common things that will happen in an environment under that situation. One of the first things that's going to happen is, your client's going to bring somebody else in to have a look. And whenever that other MSP or IT professional comes in to have a look, they'll start poking around. They'll probably start using their tools. So you can create, and this is tab completion and name. There we go. Contains, and we're going to do, okay, PC anywhere. We'll pick on PC anywhere. Or maybe you don't use TeamViewer anywhere in your environments, whatever it may be. Go ahead and create this list of not necessarily forbidden applications, but create a list of applications that if this shows up in the client's environment, that might mean somebody's poking around somewhere they shouldn't. There's also the extension, the Chrome extension hunter up here. And this is a great example of optimizing workflows just to make your team members more efficient in whatever their role is concerning EDR. This is just a Chrome extension. I've got it installed on my browser here. And what this will let you do, and we're going to go look for Black FAFSA. There was a CIS that was put out for Black FAFSA. So we're going to go find this announcement. Oh, no, that was the wrong one. Here, this one. So anytime, well, not anytime, but security researchers, CISA, FBI, all kinds of organizations, private and public, release information about threats. Those will be released as indicators of compromise. They'll be released as artifacts, as Sigma rules, as Yara rules. What we're looking at here is this sticks formatted. I'll go for the XML. So if I was so inclined, I could absolutely read through all of this information and find whatever is relevant to me and start grabbing, and copy pasting and looking for these indicators, for these URLs that are being connected to these IP addresses that are being connected to. And I don't have time to do that. I'm not going to have time to come through here and find each one of these, find whatever hash or whichever URL or whatever else that might be needed. So I can simply come in here and just use the threat hunter to say, well, okay, find me, these IP addresses. I need to create a query to see if any of my devices communicated with any of these IP addresses. And it will go over, create that query for me, populate it, and then here we go. I can look for that across my estate very quickly. And this can make somebody on your team a better threat hunter. It will speed up their processes a little bit. Now, I don't expect to have every MSP having somebody on staff that can do this kind of work for you, but it's useful. It's raising your capabilities. All right. One more thing. Checking a few questions that came in. Some questions. The S1 complete reverse the values of the registry to original value automatically. So yeah, whenever you are looking at either the deep visibility or you're looking at incident and you've found whatever type of event you were looking for, so like maybe the registry. So once you say, yes, I want you to treat this as a threat, whatever was associated with this registry modification here, it will go do it for me. There's no work for me to go do. It will revert the registry modification for me without any other involvement. So, looking to the future, what we just covered, think of this as we just got you caught up on a lot of capabilities that currently exist, but this was catch up. There's now looking to the future and being prepared for future changes. I recommend, and this is something you can change back and forth at the moment freely, so don't be afraid to test this out. If you go to your user in the top right, my user, you can change to the Singularity Operations Center. This is a peek into the future. New coat of paint. Things have changed their position in the dashboard a little bit. New things have been added, but this is just a look into what the EDR dashboard is going to look like in the future. Yeah. And again, things do look different, but not too different. They're just in different locations. So if I want to go look at the policy for an individual site or client inside of here, I can just go to policy settings, policy, and then, well, this will look very familiar. This is, the same options that were available in the other version of the dashboard view. just a slightly different coat of paint. Um, I would take the time to come in here and just get some familiarity with it to start practicing with it because these are going to be, this is going to be, again, the future. But we still have a lot of the same, again, the same information is available, the same options are there. It's simply slightly different ways of presenting it and making it available for you and presenting you with different, with new, more efficient, better workflows. This is again a future change. There's no um, set in stone date for whenever this would be a manual switch over yet. But it's worthwhile to let everybody on your team know that this is the future at some point, and you'll need to go ahead and start getting familiar with it. But there will be new things to learn, new capabilities, new ways of visualizing and understanding the events and information that are happening in a system. So here I can see that shadow copy deletion that I was trying to carry out earlier. I can see where that propagates out to and what was involving and affecting a part of that. And this gets very, very, very useful for you the more convoluted, the more complicated, the more widespread the particular event or it might be that you're looking at, such as right here. You may feel like this is over your head. You don't need this. If that's kind of your first knee jerk response, that's true. You probably don't need this for the packages and services that you have sold, but you're absolutely going to need the data that this is built on um, for true investigations. Whenever something absolutely actually goes sideways, production is stopped, and um, you have to figure out what happened and you have to evict attackers, and you need to have good telemetry and good analytical data and good artifacts around to prove to other third parties. Because again, MSPs are very often much more used to being the professionals in the room and the we have final say. But the market is changing, the channel is changing, businesses and small and medium businesses are changing how they interact and respond to threats and incidents. And it's only going to become more formalized over time, and the expectations are going to change. And this is where and what you need to grow into to be a successful MSP in the future. And this is going to feel for a lot of us like the line between MSP and MSSP is blurred a little bit. It absolutely is. And that's a trend that's only going to continue because potential clients are not looking for computer help anymore. They are looking for cybersecurity help, and that's going to lead them to MSSPs quicker than it will lead them to MSP. So if you're not building and marketing and growing yourself towards that, then it will have an impact on future growth. How much? Going to be completely dependent on your client base, your region, the verticals you support, but there will be some impacts. All right, so it looks like we got most of the questions answered that came through the questions panel. If I missed anything, feel free to throw that into the chat real quick here in the last few minutes while we're waiting for that. I'm going to throw out a poll really quickly, just to give us some feedback really quickly. How useful was today's session? 5, very useful. 1, not useful at all for you. And this is we did focus on some specific capabilities versus trying to cover everything that's available inside of EDR. There's a ton of additional stuff that's available inside of EDR as well as available back on the Insight dashboard for monitoring and some other things, but those are all covered in the public demos and everything else. We wanted to focus on some more advanced capabilities today. Thank you, everybody, for the feedback. I'll keep an eye on the chat here just to see if any of those additional questions come in. As always, thank you for taking the time to join us for another masterclass. We do appreciate that, as an MSP, it is hard to set aside time to sit and listen to a vendor or for future education. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us for today. Even though it was only an hour, your time is valuable. Don't hesitate to reach out to your PSMs if you're interested in MDR, or if you're interested in starting that EDR trial, go ahead and start that up inside of your dashboard. Also, if you would be so kind, you can provide us with reviews for Incentral if you are here from the Incentral side of things. There is some opportunities there for a gift card just to compensate for the time it takes to do the surveys. And some questions that are coming in. If you're using S1 Complete, do you have access to the Graph Explorer? Yes, you do. The Graph Explorer, you can use the Graph Explorer even with the control license. Just with the complete license, of course, there is more data available. So the ability to enrich, visualize, make better sense of a before and after of an event for you by having the complete license available, but it's not locked behind the complete license. All right, everybody. Looks like that's all of the questions that have come in. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us. I hope you got some value out of today's session, and hopefully we will see you on future office hours, boot camps, and master classes.